Between 2003 and 2015, I worked as a civilian contractor attached to a federal documentation program in Washington state. The title on my badge meant very little. What I actually did was read. I read reports. I listened to recorded interviews. I organized files created by people who were no longer reachable because they had retired, or died, or simply stopped cooperating. I drove out to meet witnesses in motels and diners, and once in a parked car in the rain outside a decommissioned naval facility, because the man I was interviewing refused to be recorded indoors. Not the version of this work you have seen dramatized, not the war rooms with red telephones, not the secure briefings with someone drawing circles on a chalkboard. Those things may exist somewhere. I never saw them. What I saw were filing boxes, fluorescent lighting, a coffee maker no one ever cleaned. Most of what came across my desk was explainable. 9 out of every 10 reports had a probable cause in the conclusion column before I ever touched them. Satellites, military aircraft, atmospheric inversions that make a single light appear to multiply across the sky. I became fluent in ordinary explanations because they were usually correct. The cases that stayed with me were the ones where I reached the conclusion column and found it empty. I am not going to tell you these stories prove anything. I reviewed the evidence myself. I know its limits. But there are 5 reports I have never fully set down. I still think about what the woman in the 3rd case said at the end of our interview, before she walked to her car and never returned another call. These are not famous cases. The people involved mostly wanted nothing to do with attention. One asked me directly not to use her name. I honored that. None of them profited from what they experienced. Most of them would have preferred to forget it. The first case came from a logging community in the northern part of the state. Winter, the kind of cold that comes with fog, not snow, where visibility drops to a few car lengths and the trees disappear into gray before they reach their full height. A man named Roy, a timber surveyor, had been working a section of land several miles from the nearest paved road. He was alone. He had worked that area for 11 years and knew the terrain the way some people know their own houses. He knew the sounds it made. He trusted his own senses there the way you trust the floor when you step out of bed in the dark. One afternoon in late November, he heard something he could not place. Not an animal, not machinery, not wind. He described it as a pressure rather than a sound. Something that occupied a frequency just below what he could fully register, but that he felt in his sternum and in his back teeth. The feeling continued for roughly 4 minutes. He timed it because he checked his watch, he said, the way you do when you are trying to stay calm. Then it stopped, and the woods went completely silent, not quiet, silent. The birds were gone. The wind was gone. Even the creak of the trees in their own weight, constant in that area, was absent. He stood still for 2 more minutes before walking back to his truck. When I interviewed him 4 years after the event, his account was almost word-for-word identical to the original statement. Memory is not stable. Memory fills gaps with things that make sense. Roy's account had not shifted in 4 years in any meaningful way. He told me the silence was the part he still thought about, not the pressure, the silence. He said it was the wrong kind, like the world had been briefly switched off. I looked for explanations. Infrasound from geological activity, industrial equipment beyond the ridgeline. None held when I checked the environmental records from that date. The case remained open when I left the program. The second case involved a retired school teacher named Carol, living alone near the coast. She reported watching a light move across the water for approximately 20 minutes. What warranted my attention was that she reported the same light in the same location across 3 separate nights and kept a written log with times and compass bearings measured using a device she had bought at a marine supply store. Her log was precise enough that investigators cross-referenced her bearings against maritime traffic records and atmospheric data. Nothing matched. No vessel, no aircraft, no weather event. When I asked her why she had kept the log, she said she knew no one would believe her without evidence. She said it the way a person says something they decided years ago and stopped needing to justify. The third case is the one that stayed with me longest. I will not use the witness's name because she asked me not to. She was a former federal employee. Precise. The kind of person who corrects herself mid-sentence rather than let an approximation stand. She had been traveling alone in the eastern part of the state. She pulled off the road because she saw something low over a lake that she initially assumed was a flare. Then she realized it was not moving the way a flare moves. It was not falling. It was holding position. She sat in her car with the engine off and watched it for close to 6 minutes. Then it moved, not across the water, toward her. She said it stopped at a distance she estimated at 300 feet. She became aware of a sound she described as the hum a power line makes when you stand directly beneath it, that low electric frequency you feel in your jaw as much as you hear it. The light remained for another minute. Then it was gone. At the end of the interview, I asked what she believed the object was. She looked at me for a moment and said she did not think that was the right question. The right question, she said, was what it knew about her. Whether something looking at you can learn something from looking. Whether being observed by a thing you cannot identify leaves a mark you cannot see. Then she picked up her coat and left. I sat in that room for a while. I did not write anything down. I did not know what to write. 2 more cases. I will be brief. One involved a group of hunters who found a section of terrain where their compasses stopped functioning reliably over an area roughly the size of a football field. The effect lasted 40 minutes before resolving without explanation. When investigators visited 6 weeks later, nothing at those coordinates should have caused it. The last case I will not describe, not because it was the least strange, because one of the witnesses is still alive, still living quietly, still hoping that what they saw on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon was something they simply misunderstood. I hope that for them too. When you spend years reviewing reports like these, you develop a particular relationship with uncertainty, not comfort, more like tolerance. You learn to hold open questions the way you hold a file with no conclusion column entry. You carry it. You do not put it down. You understand that some things filed under unknown stay there. But the woman who asked me whether something could learn from looking at you, I never found a category for that question. I still have not.